So when we talk about the inheritance in general, there are two ways in which inheritance can happen. One is classical inheritance and another is object-based inheritance or the prototype-based inheritance. Okay, classical and another is prototype typical. We can say prototypical inheritance. So there are two different paradigms we can say. And in classical we have Java language. In prototype-based we have got JavaScript. So what's the difference between these two? If you understand the difference between these two types of inheritance, then it'll be very easy for you to understand the JavaScript object and how they work. Basically, the inheritance mechanism in JavaScript. So remember that in Java we have got the classes, and if you want to extend or inherit some properties from other classes, we just extend the classes. For example, say there is a Tesla car which extends say car class. Okay, Tesla class extends car class. So here remember that we haven't created any object, it is just the classes. Both are classes, Tesla and car, both are classes. So here Tesla is extending the car class. So whatever the properties, methods that are there in this car class that are defined there, that will get inherited in this particular class, Tesla class. Remember that we haven't created any object so far, it is just extending the properties of one class into the another class. And then later on when we create the objects, all those properties that are being inherited, that object that is being created, it will get those properties and methods. So each object that you're going to create, it will have separate copies of the properties and methods. So that is about the classical inheritance. Now talking about the prototypical inheritance, remember that in the prototypical inheritance we don't have concept called as classes or the blueprint, those kind of things. Instead we have got the prototype. So what is prototype? Prototype, basically you can think about the prototype in a simple way as an object. It is just one simple object. Okay, prototype is basically an object. So basically what is happening here is object is inheriting from another object. Say for example, we have got Tesla object and it will inherits. So remember that here also inheritance is happening, but here we are talking about the actual objects and not the classes or the types. So I'm going to show you one example where I will be creating one object called as car and another object Tesla, and then that Tesla object is going to inherit this car object. So all the properties or the methods that are there on this car object will be inherited by the Tesla object. And very important thing that you need to remember is that in prototypical inheritance, what happens is each object has its own properties that are already there, and if there is no property available on that object, then what happens is that JavaScript will look at the prototype object from which it is inheriting, and if that prototype object has got that property, then it will be accessed. That is how the prototype inheritance works. If that object doesn't have the property, then it will follow that prototype chain until it finds the null. So most of the objects will inherit from the object, special object called as object. So it is a bit confusing and ambiguous to say this thing, but that is how it is. There is a special object called as object in JavaScript, and all the remaining objects will inherit from that particular object. So it just follows that prototype chain. So there can be one object which is inheriting from another object, then that object is inheriting from another object. So there can be a link, right? And it will keep on following that link until it finds the null. So when it reaches the null, that means that prototype chain is finished. And then at that point of time, if it doesn't find any property, it will throw the error saying that this property is not defined. So enough theory, let me jump onto the laptop and then show you the live example of this inheritance, prototype based inheritance, where we are going to create two objects, Tesla and car, and then Tesla will be inheriting the properties of the car object. So let's go. So I have opened the developer tools in Google Chrome and I'm in the console tab. Here you can write any JavaScript that you want to execute. So I'm going to create a simple Tesla object over here. So let Tesla is equals to, and I'm going to create this property battery capacity and then hit enter. That's it. Tesla object is created, and if you just put Tesla there, so it is going to show this object. So you can see that this object has got this property and this object is inheriting this base object, that is object, okay, and it has got this property. So most of the objects will have these properties because those objects will be inheriting from this one. But this Tesla object has got just own property, that is battery cap, and all these are inherited properties, okay. So now let us create another object called as car, and let us put these properties make model here. These double quotes are not required. If you don't want to put these double quotes for these property names, that's also perfectly fine. And the car object is also created, and you can see this is how the car object is looking like. Currently it is only these properties, but values are undefined. Now what I want to do is that I want to inherit the properties that are defined on the car object into the Tesla object. So basically what you have to do is that you have to use this method object.set prototype of Tesla, and in here car. So I want to inherit all the properties of car into Tesla. So this is the syntax for this, and I'm just gonna hit enter. Alright, now that Tesla is inheriting car, so let us see how Tesla object looks like now. So you can see that the Tesla object still has got just one property, battery capacity. Now where are those other properties, make model year? These properties are still there, but to access those properties you will have to go to the prototype chain. So you can just expand this one, and you can see that this Tesla object prototype is another object, and let us see what properties it has got. So you can see this make model here, these properties are there, but in the parent object, that is car object, and this car object itself is inheriting from the base object which has got these properties. Okay, so that's it. That's how the prototype chain works in JavaScript. If you are clear with this concept, then most of the things will fall in place and it will be very easy for you to understand the JavaScript inheritance mechanism. Thanks for watching.